I always had in the back of my mind that, I'm going to make this happen. And, I love challenges, and this was, by far the hardest thing that I've ever done, but it's been, incredibly rewarding, and I've learned so much along the way. It's been such an incredible journey and process. And to put it like that, I guess hummus is really what got me through.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Some people were born to be chefs. From families that place food at the centre of everything they do, families that forge careers working the land, or acknowledging and accentuating the fruits of the land on the plate, through generations, through different cultures, and celebrating what it means to break bread. Tom Sarafian is an award-winning chef and now the owner of Sarafian, producers of hummus. Tom, how are you?
Very well, thanks, Huck. How you going, mate?
Good. Your father and grandfather were chefs. Did you have any choice but to become a chef?
Yeah, I did. I had every choice, but I think the road was paved pretty clearly for me, and I had my heart set on becoming a chef as far back as I can remember.
You've had a fascinating year, which we can get into, the closure of your restaurant. You've started manufacturing a retail product. But how important was food to you growing up in your family?
Yeah, extremely important. My mum is also a fantastic cook and a gardener and horticulturalist. And, even my grandparents as well, fantastic cooks. My grandfather, a chef. So, yeah, I was really, really lucky and extremely fortunate to grow up with beautiful food in abundance, and, with parents who were in the food world. I learnt firsthand from them, not only the importance of ingredients from mum growing veggies in the garden that were picked fresh before meals, but also from dad how to cook them and bring the best out of them. And so I grew up, very lucky to be always eating delicious foods, and it was very much a big part of my childhood and upbringing.
Tell us a bit about the heritage of your parents and grandparents and the sort of feasts that you experienced as a kid with the family.
Yeah, so I grew up eating, because dad being a chef and always cooking in busy restaurants, mum was doing most of the cooking at home. And my mum's Australian and my father is Armenian. He was born, and his parents were born in Egypt, and they grew up there. So I grew up pretty much eating, whatever other average Australian kid eats at home. But on Sundays for big, beautiful Sunday lunches at grandparents' house, and special occasions, birthdays, Christmases, things like that, we would go to my Armenian grandparents' house, and it was always really interesting and exciting to eat these foods that I wasn't eating on a daily basis. They were sort of rather saved for special occasions. And they were always incredibly delicious. My grandfather being a chef as well, he cooked around Melbourne in mostly French restaurants, but he would also, cook things that he learned how to cook and grew up eating in Egypt, and that his Armenian parents would cook for him. So, yeah, there were always exotic, beautiful flavors that were new to me. And, I just have so many, fond memories of dishes that they would put on. But, yeah, like I said, always save for sort of special occasions.
Are there any dishes from that time that inspire the food that you do now as a chef?
Yeah, very much so. But sort of only in the recent years where I've been sort of looking back to those meals and reminiscing and, calling grandma and saying, hey, remember this dish you used to cook, or how grandpa used to cook this, how did he make that? Because a lot of it is like looking through cookbooks and doing research for Middle Eastern cooking, which is what I cook, and seeing things and being like, oh, I think, I ate that as a kid growing up. I can sort of remember that, or something very similar anyways. And like things like hummus was a big part of it. Like I remember being a little kid and not knowing what anything was, but always reaching for the hummus, which my grandfather would always make fresh, beautiful hummus, which is always, incredibly delicious. And I think the Egyptian style hummus as well, which was a bit maybe different to Lebanese, and it was like incredibly rich with tahini and a lot of garlic on there as well.
Take us back to when you first stepped into a commercial kitchen. Do you remember what it was like working as an apprentice?
Yeah, so I think I was always, going to be a chef, and my dad taught me things like how to use a knife and how to cook dishes at home. And I kind of grew up as a little kid at primary school and going and hanging out afterwards in Dad's kitchens, and just doing things like standing on milk crates and helping peel prawns and pod peas and broad beans and those kind of jobs. So I was already had this sort of introduction to that world and somewhat of an understanding. So as soon as I left high school, I jumped straight into an apprenticeship, and I was really lucky to land one at the Stokehouse, which my dad used to cook there, back in the day as well. So yeah, no, I had these sort of memories of growing up in St Kilda and going to the Stokehouse and eating Dad's food, and I don't know, there was something that just sort of lured me to be there. So yeah, I was really lucky to land an apprenticeship there, which I completed, and I think I cooked there for about 4 years. And it was a great place. It was a great place to learn. Anthony Huckstep, the chef at the time, was a great teacher, and I was really lucky to just sort of move my way around the whole kitchen and spend 6 months making pasta on the pasta section, then another 6 months in the cold larder, and then being on the grill, learning how to cook meats and fish and things like that, and then even end up cooking in the pastry section. So I got a really good all round experience through my apprenticeship, and I think that was really cool and really lucky to have that experience.
Greg Malouf had a big impact on your life. Tell us about where that started and the relationship that you guys ended up having.
Yeah, Greg, incredible, amazing chef, and such a beautiful guy. It was actually at the Stokehouse. I remember, it was such an awesome working life being at the Stokehouse. Even if you do a double shift, you get a break during the day. And, whether you jump in St Kilda Beach and have a bit of a swim or rest on the sand for a little while, enjoy some sun, or I'd walk down Ackland Street and get a coffee and just hang out in Readings. It's a bookshop that had, a wide range of cookbooks. And I remember on my break one day, picking up one of Greg's books. It was Saha, his Lebanese and Syrian book, and flicking through the pages, and it was Saha, his Lebanese and Syrian book. And I remember seeing dishes in there that reminded me of foods that I grew up eating at my grandparents' home, and seeing them in a new light. Cooking at this Stokehouse in this two-hat restaurant environment, and at that age when you're a young chef, fine dining at that time anyway was, everything. And seeing those dishes that were just so sort of rustic that my grandparents would cook, but Greg's has this beautiful touch, this finesse to, puts them in a light that I'd never seen them before. And I was incredibly blown away by that. And I started cooking from the book, staff meals at the Stokehouse. I think it was towards the end of my apprenticeship, where I was getting a little bit more confident, and, I would do things like spend 3 days sort of slowly prepping in any sort of spare moments I had for some elaborate meal. And, we'd be cooking for like 30 staff members in total. So I'd make like, a version of his bistilla or something like that just took, so much work and love. And people would really blown away by it, and I really became more confident from that, because I think I gained a little bit of a reputation for cooking awesome staff meals, which was really cool. And then one thing sort of led to another. I think someone joined the team who used to work at Momo, and I was like, oh, what's it like? I think I want to go there next. And I'd finished up my apprenticeship at that time, and I just got in touch with Brooke, who was the head chef at the time, sorry, and she said, yeah, we're not really hiring, but just come in and, we'll meet you and have a chat and see what happens. And I did. And, Greg was there, and I was a bit starstruck, but he's such a lovely guy. It was great, meeting him and Brooke and getting to know those guys. And, it was only about 4 or 5 months later, I think, when they called me and said, yeah, we've got a spot, come on down. And that sort of just changed everything, cooking Middle Eastern food. It just felt right. I remember, being a little bit lost, not knowing what to cook, whether I was going to go down the Thai route. I was really inspired by like David Thompson's books. I loved, cooking his recipes on my days off. Or even, I remember picking up Damien Pignolet's French cookbook and being incredibly inspired by that. But yeah, it was really when I joined the Momo team and continued cooking Middle Eastern foods on my days off with my family. And they were like, you know what, this is like the best food you've cooked, where I just sensed that it felt like the right thing to do. And, I felt like I was good at it. And yeah, it just seemed right. And yeah, I remember Greg had just come back from traveling. I think he was writing his Iranian cookbook, Saraban. And that was just like a whole new world of all these Persian flavors. And yeah, I think I learned a lot at Momo. Unfortunately, the restaurant closed whilst I was working there. But then an opportunity came up to join Greg in London, where he took over at Petersham Nurseries. So I moved to London and started, the whole 2-year Australian work visa thing over there.
How different was it working in London compared to the experiences that you'd had in Melbourne?
Yeah, I didn't really know what I was going to be in for. I didn't know anyone in London. I wasn't sure sort of how long I was going to be there for or what it was going to be like at all. I didn't really even know too much about Petersham Nurseries, the restaurant. Greg had just, got in touch and said, I'm at this restaurant and it's just spectacular and the produce is phenomenal. And, you should be here. So I just went for it. I didn't really think too much about it. There wasn't really anywhere else I wanted to cook in Melbourne at the time. And yeah, next thing I knew, I was there. I was in London and I was cooking with Greg at Petersham, which turned out to just be the most fantastic restaurant. It's a Michelin-starred restaurant set in a nursery. It's all outdoor seating in this just spectacular space, filled with beautiful flowers and plants and antique furniture. And yeah, it was just something else. And Richmond, where it's located, is just a stunning area. So it was a pretty unique and cool introduction to London, I guess. Yeah.
You mentioned that there was access to the most extraordinary produce. What was some of the produce that you remember that really stood out for you at that time?
Yeah, I remember Momo. Greg was always somewhat frustrated with fruit and vegetables that would come in, and I never really understood why. I was like, I think these are pretty good. What's wrong with these tomatoes? Sort of thing. That was as good as I knew them to be, I guess. But it kind of clicked because he'd trained in countries like Italy, and yeah, I kind of knew what he was talking about then because we were having tomatoes and artichokes and things like that flown in on a daily basis from Italy, and incredible fish and seafood locally sourced, and cheeses from France, and all these kinds of things that just really opens up your eyes to the beautiful produce that's there in that part of the world that we just don't have access to here. So that was just incredible. A lot of herbs and vegetables were grown on site as well, which we would pick fresh in the morning, and they'd be gone by the end of the day. It was just an incredibly inspiring experience. And yeah, I think I just started looking at food in a new way, in a way that only that kind of produce can really inspire you to.
You took a slight detour and worked with Fergus Henderson at St John, renowned, one of the world's best restaurants, a nose to tail cookery. What was that experience like compared to what you'd had up till then?
Yeah, that was something else. That was I think I went there with a friend who was cooking there, and I'll never forget that meal. There was maybe 4 or 5 of us, and Jonathan, who was the chef at St John at the time, joined us, and I think we ate everything on the menu and drank almost everything on the wine list as well. It was just such a fun experience, and the food is it's just so unique. I never had anything like it. They're just such bold, beautiful dishes, and obviously all the offal I was really excited about because I'd never eaten a lot of that stuff before, and yeah, that meal just floored me, and I ended up joining the team not long after. I kind of just said, I really, really want to work here, guys. If there's any way you can make it happen. And it was good timing because, St. John's the kind of restaurant where there's always, people staging there from all areas of the world. But I just, sort of knocked on the door at the right time, I guess, and was really lucky to end up working there for a year. And even though I sort of put, the whole Middle Eastern thing aside, I learned just so much, so many new skills, how to butcher meat and how to use restraints was probably the biggest thing that I learned at St. John. It was always about, just letting the flavours and the ingredients shine and the art of simplicity, which was a whole new thing to me. And I always had it in the back of my mind that whilst I was cooking, Fergus's food and doing everything the St. John way, that, some things like barbecuing lamb heart, I was like, a little bit of a spice or a little bit of tum on this would be really cool too. So, I was taking ideas from them and then, with the thoughts of putting my own sort of touches on them in the future.
St. John is much loved by the food world, the world over. It's a destination for anyone that works in food. Did you ever get the chance to cook for any famous food people?
Yeah, it was it was a bit of a hotspot for celebs and people like that around London. And one day we kind of caught wind that Anthony Bourdain was coming in for dinner. And I think it was through, Bourdain that I discovered St. John in the first place. So that was quite a moment. He was there and Nigella Lawson was on his table as well. So there was a bit of pressure, and I remember being on the section of the kitchen which they call the corner, and that's where you cook all the game birds. And I think it was right smack bang in the middle of game season. And what that kind of means is that, like, for me, being an outsider coming into St. John, like, I remember going in, for my days off, for my first day of the week, and seeing all these different birds in the courtroom and not knowing what they were, things like teal and, mallard ducks and grouse, and just being like, okay, you've got to cook this for lunch today. And, I remember I was cooking grouse and Bourdain ordered it and put up the tweet the next day, kind of cutting into it, saying magnificently cooked grouse at St. John. And that was just like, I can die happy now, That was pretty awesome. That was quite a moment cooking for Anthony Bourdain.
What did you take from your experiences in London before returning to Australia?
So much. St. John was also just such a great working culture. I remember being forced to take annual leave, even though I was only working there for a year. And in that time, I went and staged at Morrow, which was only up the road. And the way that sort of happened, I think I ate there, and the yogurt cake, which is like their signature dish that's been on the menu for probably 25 years now. Just sort of had a mouthful of this dessert and thought, oh my God, I need to work here to learn how to make this thing. And so, I did, and I staged there, and maybe 2 weeks into the stage, I had 6 months left of my visa, and I said, you guys, do you reckon there's any chance I could just work here for 6 months? I know that's a bit weird, but like it'd be really awesome if I could. And they said yes. I was really lucky. So I finished up at St. John and went up the road to Morrow, and I cooked there for 6 months. And I kind of got back into the whole Levantine thing and started cooking Spanish and Moroccan food for the first time as well. We sort of broadened the horizons of Middle Eastern food somewhat. There's some sort of translation through those countries as well. They've definitely got the Arabic touch in some areas. So, kind of got me back into the swing of that. And then, my time in London was up, and I'd sort of been loosely planning a trip on the way home. I was working quite a lot there, and I'd never really had time to travel around Europe or anything like that. So I'd planned a big 4-month trip on the way home, and I travelled by myself through Europe. And then to Spain. I spent a month there, and Morocco. Then I went across to Egypt and Greece. Then I visited Turkey and Lebanon, Armenia. And all these places that I'd been sort of, fantasizing about somewhat and idolizing their food. And then I got to eat it firsthand, and I ate a lot. I was just like, I went crazy. I was just like, I'm going to eat everything. I had like a list of dishes to eat in each country, and the ones I liked, I ate a couple of times. And then, yeah, I finally ended up back in Melbourne.
What were some of the highlights of that trip that has influenced you as a chef since then?
It was all really so inspiring. I think, especially being in Armenia, and meeting my family over there for the first time, aunties and cousins, and staying in their homes and having sort of home cooked Armenian dishes, which was quite unique. And yeah, apart from those sort of like hits and dishes that maybe sort of somewhat obvious that were on my list, maybe the highlights were discovering more of the sort of regional dishes that you don't hear about so much, and things that might be somewhat authentic or traditional, but then you eat like a chef's their own personal interpretation of those dishes, which you don't sort of see and read about in cookbooks or hear about from anyone. Things like a chef from this village might do it this way, and all these sort of regional variations. So that really broadened my horizons to look above and beyond what was in the cookbooks and dig a little bit deeper into the cuisines.
When you came back to Australia, that's when you started to really make a name for yourself with Middle Eastern cuisine. Tell us about that period of time and what it was like getting success and building your career in that way.
Yeah. It all happened pretty quickly. I took a sous chef position at Rumi. So, I think I was about 27 years old at the time, and it felt like it was time to sort of step up into a somewhat senior position. That very quickly became a head chef position, I think after 2 months, which was quite overwhelming. But it was really cool. I really enjoyed Rumi. I ran the kitchen there for about 3 years, and somewhere down that path, I started cooking some of my own food. Just starting off putting specials on the menu, and then got to a point where I was writing sort of half the menu. Half the menu at Rumi has been sort of a staple, and then the other half sort of changes seasonally. I was kind of keeping up with that and getting the hang of that, and leading a team for the first time. And I was really blessed to have some incredible young chefs come and join my team, and guys who are friends still, and really, really good chefs who have gone on to do amazing things. One of which, ended up going over to St. John and taking a job, which I kind of hooked him up with, and became the sous chef there. It was just a great experience all in all. Just working with people, managing people, cooking beautiful food, and just gaining more confidence to cook my own food. And I think at that 3-year point, the opportunity to open Saracen came up. So I left Rumi, and I went on another sort of research trip back to the Middle East. I visited Iran for the first time, and that was incredible. The Iranian food, it's somewhat similar to Middle Eastern food, but it's very much its own. And all these new flavors and which led to new ideas. That was a big part of what I cooked at Saracen, Iranian food. I met chefs there, people who worked in saffron manufacturing, food writers, and just learned so much. And, I was there with a pen and a notepad in my hand every day and eating as much as I could again, and just, coming up with ideas of dishes to put on the opening menu at Saracen. And then I went back to Beirut. And again, I was very lucky. The first time I visited these countries, I'd never really had any idea what I was doing or where to go or anybody there. But by this time, I sort of made some connections in that sort of food world. And I was, really lucky to be taken around. People like Jade George, who writes the publication, The Carton magazine, in Beirut, very generously at the time took me to some of the best restaurants and, to wineries and places in the Bekaa Valley. And, that was at the point actually where I ate the best hummus that I'd ever had. And I think, I sat down taking all these notes about the texture of hummus and thinking, okay, this has got to be part of what we do when we open Saracen. I want to put hummus on the menu. But it's got to be like the best hummus that I can possibly make. I became a bit obsessed with hummus, and when I came back from Melbourne via Istanbul, which is another inspiring experience altogether, I started playing around with hummus recipes and techniques, and developing my recipe. And when we opened Saracen, the idea was to put hummus on the menu, but to change the toppings. And the toppings is the thing that they do in Lebanon, where it's more than just a dip. It's like a meal in itself. Hummus with ground lamb and spices and nuts fried in butter on top. For me, that's probably my death row dish. It's just the best. So that was the idea, to sort of do that, but change the topping seasonally. We opened with a barbecue calamari topping, and then I think we did the classic lamb. Maybe in autumn we did a pumpkin one, and then through summer I did a prawn and crab topping. But all the time they were sort of based on that classic lamb awama recipe. So all the same sort of flavors and spices and everything, but with seafood, which was something new, and it was just so well received that I never took it off the menu. I think it was on there for almost 2.5 years. It became a bit of a signature, and that sort of led to the style of my food as well at Saracen. I think I developed this style where I would sort of take an idea, an authentic or traditional recipe or technique, and just do a little bit of my touch on it, using beautiful local produce, that just sort of made sense, to use those sort of flavors, but with the same sort of flavor profiles and characteristics of the authentic recipes.
You became obsessed with hummus, and it was a real key dish at Bar Saracen. But what makes a great hummus? What does it take to make it?
It takes a lot of time. It took me about 3 years to get it to a point where I was satisfied. Look, I think hummus is, for me, it's a real art of simplicity. It's something that only has, a handful of ingredients. So straight away, that just makes me think they've got to be the best quality ingredients. So that took a bit of time, finding what the best chickpeas were, the best tahini, the best salt, the best olive oil, to get the best garlic, to get the most delicious lemons, and then the technique on top of that. So I developed a technique where, I soak them for 2 days. I changed the water a whole bunch of times, and then I cook them in a pressure cooker until they're extremely soft. And I blitz them twice when they're hot, and then the next day when they're cold. And that's when I add the lemon juice and the garlic when it's cold, rather than adding it, in that one single go when it's hot, which in my opinion gives it a bit of a sort of cooked and dull lemon garlic flavor. So this process, it's a lot more labor intensive, I guess, but the end result is something pretty awesome. I also found this way of sort of agitating the chickpeas and cooking them to a point where the skins would sort of lift to the surface, and then I would skim the skins off, which makes it incredibly smooth as well. And all of this came from a lot of trial and error, and just making it every single day, trying, the next day to make it a little bit better than the last.
Bar Saracen won many accolades in the 3 years that you had it open, including #1 restaurant in Victoria. It closed in February this year. Tell us about that time, and was it a difficult decision to make?
Yeah, I think. I wasn't the one who made the decision. I was the chef at Saracen. I was never financially involved or anything like that. It was absolutely heartbreaking. COVID hit at a point where we just really, really found our groove, and I think I'd, become really confident and satisfied with my menus and my cooking. It was a long road to get to that point, maybe at sort of the 1.5 to 2 year mark. I think we had a great summer. I think the summer of 2020 was, the busiest, best summer we had. And then, not long after, the pandemic hit was incredibly frustrating. And it was really hard for us, being smack bang in the middle of the CBD down a little laneway. Takeaway was always going to be, a big ask. But we gave it, everything we had, and it sort of, forced me to be really, really creative with takeaway offerings. We did some pretty cool stuff. We did some, takeaway events. So I'd even invite some friends as guest chefs to come and cook, and we'd put like a farm, like one of our, fantastic local organic farms in the spotlight, and we did menus using, I think, their first produce. We even did an event with Brooke, who was the head chef at Momo, and Simone, who used to cook there back in the day. And we cooked Greg's recipes. We did a one-off Malouf dinner, which was pretty awesome. And they all went really well. Like they were just the right thing to do to keep the team motivated and to keep us going. And then when we did finally open back up after the long lockdown, we ended up offering a $90 set menu, which was, something new for us. And we brought back all the sort of hits, all the, favorite dishes for everyone that had been missing them. And, as weird as it was in that time with all the restrictions and nobody really knew, what was going on, it was good. It was good to be back. But yeah, unfortunately, it all came to a somewhat sudden end. And I wasn't ready to stop cooking my food. So, at that time as well, it was during summer, I think 2021, I started doing some some outdoor barbecue pop-up events around town, which were pretty cool, pretty fun. My brother, who's a DJ, was playing music outdoors, and I'd invite, people to come and cook and just let them have sort of free reign on the menu. And yeah, that was a whole lot of fun, and that was really good. And that sort of, one thing led to another. And I was sort of, in conversations with Little Andorra, which is just up the road from us at Saracen in Carlton, to do something there. But then when Saracen, was announced that it was going to close, I quickly, I think it was 2 days after Saracen closed, we ended up taking a residency at Andorra. And I brought Mikey, one of the chefs who was with me at Saracen, over, and we just kept it going. And it was great. The 3 months became 4. We went through a snap lockdown or two, I think. I think it was the last day. It was meant to be a big last Sunday lunch feast. We ended up going to lockdown that day, so we sort of flipped it and did kebabs out the window. But that was great too. Like we had a huge response and a lot of support. And yeah, but somewhere along that timeline, I felt like it was the right time to launch my hummus, which is something that I'd always wanted to do. I came really close to doing it at Saracen, and I just never really had the time, being so busy. But yeah, at Andorra, I just felt like it was the right time to do it. And that was the next chapter for me.
And what sort of impact has the last year and a half had on you? Has there been some positives to come out of this? And, how are you looking to move forward now that you're sort of not working at a restaurant at the moment?
Yeah, it's been a huge challenge, obviously, for everyone. But I think I'm really lucky and grateful that I've had in the back of my mind something to be working towards, and that's launching my hummus. And that was born out of the love and support through 3 years cooking it at Saracen, and people sort of telling me, this is so good. It's one of Melbourne's, must-eat dishes, and all these kind of compliments. And, I've never been good at taking compliments, but when you start hearing, so many of the same ones, you actually do start accepting them. And yeah, I just, that really helped me, knowing that I had something to move towards, as stressful as everything was happening, in the hospitality industry due to COVID, and so many friends and chefs were having such, difficult times, and no one was enjoying doing takeaway. I always had in the back of my mind that, I'm going to make this happen. And, I love challenges, and this was, by far the hardest thing that I've ever done, but it's been, incredibly rewarding, and I've learned so much along the way. It's been such an incredible journey and process. And, I couldn't have done it without the love and support from everybody, in the industry and beyond. So I think, to put it like that, I guess hummus is really what got me through. And yeah, I'm so grateful for that.
I know you've only just launched your hummus, but what's next for you from a chefing perspective?
Yeah, look, I think I'm pretty overwhelmed. We've just launched the company a week ago, and the response has been so heartwarming, and just I'm just completely overwhelmed. I thought I was going to sort of start off small and grow bit by bit, but we're selling out. Like, stockists are just asking for as much as they can get, and I'm under the pump, and I'm having to expand pretty quickly, which has meant that I've employed some chefs who have been out of work to come and help me, and we're just gonna keep going and see where it takes us. I'll introduce a few more products down the line, but I'm definitely not stepping away from restaurants. I'm very much looking forward to opening my own restaurant as soon as I can. It's just not the right time to do it at the moment. And I've got all kinds of crazy ideas on what that might look like. But the best thing about sort of stepping away for a little bit is that I've got time to think about what I want to do, which has been really valuable. And yeah, just sort of, brainstorming ideas and where it would be and what it would look like and what kind of food I would do. It's really exciting, and I'm patient. I'm very much, holding back until the time is right, but I'm just so excited to one day make it happen.
Well, Tom, I'm sure a lot of people are very much looking forward to seeing what you do from now on, and also getting their hands on your hummus as well, if it's not selling out. Mate, we've loved having you on Deep in the Weeds today to hear your story. Please keep in touch, and we'll catch up again soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much, Huck. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you. I've been really enjoying everybody's stories, so thank you for having me on. Really appreciate it, mate.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.